As you were talking, I was wondering, are there like deal terms that buyers mostly overlook that end up costing them a lot? You mentioned the deal terms, and some people might not know what you're talking about. A lot of people in our audience are first-time buyers. So can you talk a little bit about the deal terms and maybe some of the things people overlook, or maybe they commit to something that's not good for them?
Sure. Well, I'll start off with the deal term that generally puts the blinders on the buyer is the purchase price. They start looking through whether it's through BizBuyNet or BizBuySell or whatever they're looking at, and they see purchase price, and then they see that this is the gross revenue for the business, and they get so locked on those numbers, and they start doing in their math in their head. Well, I could earn this much per month, and they the to get your point, what do they miss out on? They miss out on things like what's the seller transition? Well, when the seller is selling this, is there going to be any transition period? Because you're buying a business you've never run, you've never operated it, and even if you have, even if you're a McDonald's owner and you're buying another McDonald's franchise, yes, they have very similar models, but that franchise owner might be running it and hiring people in a much different fashion than you are. And if there's no seller transition, it is literally here's the keys, that's yours, have a great day, bye. You're stuck with whatever models they have in place, whatever programs they have in place. So that's something that time and time again is generally last minute that, oh, what's the seller transition? What's going to be the period? And then we have to try and negotiate that at the very end. And a lot of sellers are selling because they're retiring or they're moving to something completely different or they're physically moving. So there is no opportunity. So also the other piece that we always look at when it comes to risk is indemnification. Sorry, I'm getting caught on a word. So when you're buying this, what risk are you buying into? What's the operational risk of this business? With that, so that's one piece of the indemnification and the risk. But the other piece is what are the risks that are already in place with the business, whether it be vendor contracts, employee contracts, whether it be something inside the industry, whether there's legal wranglings coming down the pike that could potentially impact that business. And those are the things that a lot of buyers tend to overlook. When it comes to the risk factor, that's to me the single biggest thing that is often overlooked because people get so locked on the purchase price. I can afford that. I can get an SBA loan for that. I can make that work with friends and family. And I've always pictured myself as owning that McDonald's I'm not shilling for McDonald's. I just use that as an example. Owning that restaurant, and that's always been my passion. But they don't pay attention to the what are you buying beyond just the business itself. I've had many a business where we started to do the due diligence alongside of the buyer side, and we've run into things that have really raised eyebrows. And it's to the point where we've had deals just that they've been shut off because the risk is too large. Normally, it's over finances or unpaid taxes, liens that are sitting on the business. I just recently talked with a client. They purchased their business. We did not help them purchase their business, but they purchased it. They were referred to us because they ran into a problem when they were doing the purchase. They did their due diligence, and whoever was working with them never checked to see if there was a lien against the business. And come to find out, there was a mechanic's lien against the business because they had a contractor that had done some roof repairs and some HVAC work and some other things. And the seller knew he was selling and never paid the contractor. So in the midst of everything, prior to the sale, so it didn't show up when people were doing, well, we think it was before the sale, but we were told after the sale, the lien showed up against the business. And it wasn't specifically against the previous owner, it was just against the business because they did the work. They were contracted by the business. So they asked, hey, do I have to pay this? Because this was done prior to me. And we're like, well, unfortunately, yes. You could fight it, but it's going to cost you more to fight it than it will to just pay the ticket off. So those are the big things that I think are the two or three big things that I think people really overlook. I think they get very focused on the cool numbers, the purchase price, the how much revenue that this brings in. Or I also see it with, hey, if I buy this, I know that if I fix it, I can flip it for a multiple. I can flip it for 4 to 5 times, of EBITDA. I can do this, I can do that. And they stop thinking about the actual business itself that they're about to purchase.
Yeah, this is so good. As you're talking, I think of conversations I've had either with brokers or other sellers, and I've walked away from deals because I saw red flags, and I don't even have the background you have and the experience you have. So imagine how many red flags I probably missed. Are there any red flags you can think of in a purchase agreement that should make a buyer walk away, maybe from your past experience? If you can think of an example or two, just things
Sure.
you've seen. You've mentioned a few things that could be in the purchase agreement, but it's very often it happens, like you said, people fall in love with the business and they start to overlook red flags. So, can you think of any other red flags, maybe in a purchase agreement,
Sure.
that would
Uh,
be dangerous?
Sure, I'll give you the standard lawyer answer up front. It all depends on the risk that the buyer is willing to accept. But I'll tell you where I've seen, in my experience, where I've seen a lot of the risk showing up, generally is in the financing side of things. A lot, I'd love to give you a percentage, but I've seen a lot of seller financing that has come up where they'll carry part of the note or they'll carry part of the financing, which is fantastic for a buyer because that gives a lot of extra opportunity for them to not have to try and get that very large chunk of financing up front or come out of pocket if the seller's willing to carry some of the debt. The problem with that is that I've also seen a lot of sellers structure that financing in very I don't want to say unfair, very one-sided ways where there is very, very strong and purposefully worded repayment plans where there is no option to have any leeway whatsoever. And it is, although it's on paper, when you hear seller financing, most buyers are like, oh, that's fantastic. You know, they're going to carry 20%. Well, they will, but if you're a day late, they're going to call the entire amount due. Or if they're 3 days late. Now, a lot of those, is it enforceable by a court? Normally not because of, they want fair dealing, but it's going to cost you to take that to court and fight somebody, down the road. And that's what we look at is, not just can you win, but what is it going to cost you to win? So seller financing is something that whenever I see it, I always dig way deep into it to find out what is the actual benefit that you're getting. Is it honestly worth it? Because on the face of it, seller financing sounds great, but I've seen it not a lot, but I've seen enough to be weary of how did their counsel write it up, and what are you actually getting from the seller financing side of things? Some of the other pieces that I see are not big red flags, but potential red flags, especially when you're doing the due diligence side. And if it's written, if there's any kind of contractor agreements that are a part of the purchase agreement, if you're purchasing vendor contracts, if you're purchasing any type of pre-existing business. So when you start seeing things that just it's not financially viable, where you're seeing that you're buying into a company that has multiple agreements from the same company. Like I talked about at the very beginning, you have one primary customer that owns 60% of your revenue, and you start to see things in the agreement where they have already very one-sided agreements with the company you're purchasing that has no renegotiation, that has no opportunity for you to go in and try to get it better for you. That tends to be, in my mind, or at least a red flag, maybe not a walk away from it red flag, but definitely something that the buyer needs to understand. Uh, so that way, when you go in, you know that you have that one customer that's going to have a lot of sway over the future of your business. And depending on how that relationship is already set up and structured, that one customer could make or break your business very rapidly, intentionally or unintentionally. Yeah, so I would say there's not any one thing that's a huge red flag. Uh, yeah, I've never read a contract or an agreement where I've gone, nope, we're not doing this because you wrote that there. I've seen some silliness. I've also seen sloppy drafting where you can tell when somebody took an old agreement and just kind of put it on. I've seen the wrong address. I've seen wrong business, wrong structure, wrong financing. And normally they're not trying to pull one over. I hate to say this, it's sloppy lawyering. It's somebody who's just last minute trying to throw together an agreement, or they're working without an attorney and they try to throw something together. So that's generally not a big red flag. That's just the back and forth of, hey, we nicely say, hey, I think your template's a little off. Let's, we do some redlining and we did some corrections and go forward.
Yeah, I one of the things that I've discovered in buying a service business is that A couple customers came back because the prior seller's team didn't do a good job. So they expected us to fix the problem, redo the service. And because we cared about the reputation of the business, we did the service. It cost us thousands of dollars to pay several people to redo the service that wasn't done well the prior two services. We didn't have anything in the agreement. It was a small business. We figured, it's not a big deal. We didn't have anything in the agreement. So we ended up losing thousands of dollars because we did not consider having to redo work that the prior seller got paid for, and we didn't. So those are the types of things that now I pay attention to when we're looking at businesses. And I even, having the right advisor in your corner, someone like you, it makes it really easy because the right advisor, the right attorney is going to look at these types of things. But that's just one simple example from a very small deal of ours that cost us
Yep.
thousands of dollars. Hiring someone like you would have probably cost me less. When I think of the financial aspect, I'm pretty sure it would cost me less, and I wouldn't have had to deal with the frustration of having to go back and redo service and spend
Yep.
money. And yeah, those are just from my own experience in a few deals. What's one thing that sellers do that kills deal at the last minute, and how can the business buyers protect themselves? Have you seen instances or deals in which the sellers tried to do something at the last minute
Yep.
that killed the deal?
Yes, and I hate to keep coming back to it, but a lot of times it falls into financing, where yeah the price is set, whether it's sellers carrying some of the debt and financing, or if it's just a hard money lender, whatever it might be, and then the seller comes back and they start talking about, well, by the way, we also have some debt that the business is carrying that needs to be paid off, so we're going to add that into the contract. And that's, they basically want to walk away from the business debt free because maybe they have a personal responsibility for it, or they have a personal guarantee wrapped up into that. So I see financing is normally where I see some of the last minute funny business that comes up, especially when it's dealing with larger payments up front, when they want, or smaller payments up front, but more payments over time, and they want more upfront money. I've seen that quite a few times. And then when you get to the heart of it, it's because they have a personal guarantee that they have to pay off that they didn't disclose. And, if they sell it, they now have to come up with instantly, a couple $100,000 in their guarantee to pay off. So we've seen that a few times. Some other things that we've seen is also where we get into the final stages of this is especially if you have key personnel that are that are coming over as a part of the business acquisition. And I don't mean you're buying people. They're part of the staff, and they're coming over as a part of the acquisition. And then the somewhere along the lines, and I've had this happen actually quite recently, where the seller comes over and says that one of the key people had decided already to depart, so they will be leaving with them. Because I've had a few sellers that have cherry picked some of their key personnel to take with them to go start another business over here, and they never explain that to the buyer during the due diligence process. And I've seen that a few times. So that's generally where, especially in some larger, and honestly, I see it a lot in home service businesses where they have a general manager or a manager of some sort that is kind of the glue keeping that whole office together. And when you're buying it, you're like, oh, great, I get Bob or Sally, and they're going to keep this running fantastic. And then at the very end, when you're ready to put a signature on a piece of paper, the seller tells you, by the way, Bob or Sally is coming with me. They're quitting. And you're just, well, how do I run this business now? The value of this business just took a hit because that person's expertise is a part of the value. And that I've seen that happen a few times. Some of the other things are asset based, where if you have normal, and I say standard good due diligence will get you through a lot of these, but there are some times when things just slip through because you have some not unscrupulous sellers, but you have sellers that are on that fringe of unscrupulousness and they don't really want to open the books completely. And you find out that there's liens on assets or there's unreported assets that you didn't know of that you're now purchasing, but that asset has an issue with it. It's co-owned by someone else, or there's a payment associated with that asset. and you weren't told about that. We had a landscaping company that we were helping a client buy, and we didn't know that the landscape owner had leased some excavators previously that year in order to keep up with the growing business. But when we did the due diligence, we got the list of assets and we looked them over, and they were all the company owned assets. He had, as he said, inadvertently forgotten to mention the long-term lease. I think there were 24-month leases on these excavators, which was a large bill every month payable by the business. So they were going to come over with the business, and that blew up the business for the acquisition because our buyer just knew what the revenue was going to be based off of what his carry costs were going to be for the debt and for the business, and he knew that he just couldn't afford those leases, so he had to walk away from the transaction. So a lot of times it's assets finance or key personnel is what we see that blows it up at the end. I can't remember off the top of my head where it was ever a legalism, where it was just like something written in the contract that made somebody go, "Oh, I'm not touching that," or something like you see in the movies with, "Hey, I read in page 96, there's this one sentence here, and that's going to blow this up, and I don't want to deal with that." Lawyers are not that inventive, generally speaking. We try not to be because we have reputations to maintain too. So a lot of times it comes down to just information that may not have been readily available, but it is now right at closing, and that's why I always and I know a lot of people in my business do the same thing. When we get to a point where we have finalized agreements and we're setting up financing, we're getting a closing date put together, I always do one last look. And I always do it prior to sitting down with my client. And I do one last look over the books, and I do one last reach out to the opposing counsel, and we kind of do a lawyer to lawyer, just mind meld of, is there anything else? Is there anything you guys have not had the opportunity to talk to us about? And I kind of give them, like you always kind of hear, this is your one free chance. Just let me know, and I'm not going to get screaming and yelling. Is there something that wasn't on the books? Is there something that we need to know about before we start putting signatures on paper? And 99% of the time, what I get from the opposing counsel is, "Hey, we are an open book. You've seen everything. There's nothing to our knowledge." And I have had some times where things have popped up that truly the seller just didn't know. We had, speaking of key personnel, we had a seller, and his key person, the general manager, decided to go back to school. So she said she was going to leave the company. We negotiated with her, and she ended up staying on for a couple months in order to train somebody new. But that was always her goal was, hey, she was going to go to school whether the business got sold or not. So that's something we couldn't control. So the last pitch I'll put for red flags is that it's always good to have an unbiased third party, that other set of eyes that's passionate about your success, but not passionate for the business. Meaning this isn't what, I've been thinking about doing my entire life. So I'm going to go buy the landscaping business I've always wanted because I like to ride lawnmowers. That is an actual thing of mine. I like cutting grass. It's just a thing. But yeah, so it's always good to have that third party that can just take a look and take that 30,000-foot view of what are we missing? What are we not seeing? Because there's always something. And it's small and you're like, "Ooh, good thing we caught that," and we move on. I misspelled a client's name in an agreement, like horribly misspelled it. And it got all the way to the end. It had gone through review. I had the client look at it, and a lot of times people just don't notice when their name's misspelled. They just kind of glance over because they know, "Oh, that's me. That's me." And then it was right at the end, and the opposing counsel said, "Hey, Trevor, I don't think this is your client. Is this the wrong contract?" And I looked at him like, "Oh, Lord, I misspelled their name. They're going to be pissed." So I fixed it. It was something small, but it's just little things like that.
Yeah, we own a print shop, and you would be amazed at the amount of times three people have looked at a document and there's still typos in it. Something is missing. So it's not
Yeah.
unusual. And that's why we go
Oh, yeah.
through reviews. And that's why it's important to have third party perspective, and it's important to have
Yeah.
that person to look at things. We will have your link so people can get in touch with you if they're in the
Okay.
process of buying a business or selling a business. Any last minute thoughts before we close? This has been extremely helpful, and I hope people see the benefit of thinking through some of these decisions before they sign anything.
Yeah.
But any last minute thoughts?
Sure. I always give this whenever I talk about this, I always say there's four things I want potential clients or anybody looking to buy a business to walk away with. And these are the questions you need to answer when you come to any advisor, CPA, attorney, whoever's going to be helping you with this. These are the four questions I want you to be able to answer before you have that conversation. What are you buying? What is the business? As deep as you can get into what is the actual business you're buying, what is the market, kind of get into that so you can explain that to the person that's advising you. How are you paying for it? You might not have down to the brass tacks of it, but I'm going to get an SBA backed loan. I'm going to hard money. I'm going to do VC lending, things like that. Just know how you're going to pay for it. What concerns are keeping you awake at night? What are you thinking about with this business that, hey, I love this business, but oh, what about this? What about that? Bring those to the conversation. What is keeping you up at night? Probably one of the biggest things I would say is that what is something that if you were to buy this business today and a year from now we were to talk, what is the thing that you're the most worried about falling apart with your business? And I'm not talking assets falling apart, but like the actual ownership. If I buy this business and in a year half of my employees have quit, I'm stuck. I can't manage this. What are those fears for 12 months after purchase? Is it taxes? Is it investment? Depending on whatever your business is in, bring those to the advisor that you're talking to, whether it's an attorney or a CPA, a trusted friend, whoever you're talking to. I would prefer to be an attorney. That's just, that's self-serving, but bring those answers to that conversation, because that's going to help the person supporting you know where you're coming from, know where you want to go, and be able to help you get there. All along, following with the what are your fears, what's keeping you up at night, how are you paying for it, what are you actually buying? Because we deal with so many businesses. I don't understand the local HVAC in that Ohio suburb. I don't understand it because I don't live there. I don't operate there. You do. And if you can bring me that knowledge of, hey, these things get bought and sold, every 2, 3 years. Oh, so we're thinking about where this is a buy, hold, sell. I get that. Okay. So it helps us. So those are the four things I always ask people to kind of come with the conversation. The last piece is it's don't expect it to go like you see on TV. You're never going to hire an attorney. That's a shark that's going to show up and throw papers and scream and yell and get his way. That never ever happens, only on TV. Attorneys are not scary. They're there for a purpose, and use them. Utilize an attorney for the purpose they're there for. And a lot of them are advisors at heart. They would love to help you. I don't sit around and quote people arcane legal knowledge because I hate that stuff. I learned it for the bar. I dumped it after the bar because it's not useful for most anybody. So I love to advise, and most attorneys will. So the earlier you can get one in your process, the better you'll be, generally speaking, as long as you're not mean. And if they are, fire them. You can fire an attorney anytime you want. But yeah, so that's how I'll end. And the last thing, I'll just do a pitch for if somebody needs some support or help. Like Adelia said, you'll have my link. You can always reach out. I'm not going to charge you $65 to answer an email. I should write a book, the $65 email, because I use that example everywhere. And actually, I've had many, many conversations about the silliness of that. But yeah, so I'm always available for conversation. If we get too far down the road of, hey, you start asking questions about a specific business, we'll start to talk about maybe you want to hire Trevor and his firm on to work. But yeah, so I'm always here as an asset to be used.
This was amazing. Thank you, Trevor, for your time. And I'm excited to be able to have someone like you in our network to refer to. And we're excited to see people buying businesses, having the right advisors on their side. So thank you for your
Yep.
time.
Thank you.